On the field. Off the field. Sports talk. Entertainment and more. This is Sauce on the Side. Well, hello there, Dippers, and welcome back to episode 87 of the Sauce on the Side podcast. As always, Dippers, I'm your host, Drake, joined by the man, the producer, Mr. Leighton Pip Shavantone.
This is actually not on today's docket, but happened today, so I'll just talk about it real quick. Mike Trout signed for a 12-year, $430 million contract. A lot of people I saw on Twitter and in media talking about how the Angels don't have any money to pay anybody else now. Well, one, that's not true at all because they're in Los Angeles, humongous market, and they've always had good players. Just for the past 8 years, they've been paying Pujols too much money and Josh Hamilton still money. And had those two guys worked out at all, they could have competed 5 years ago and been really good, but it just didn't work out. So the risk with every contract is the player does not work out, but you gotta get those guys in case they do work out.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I mean, you look at how Josh Hamilton's career basically spiraled out of control. He was like a 330 power hitter. He was hitting
insane.
330 average and hitting for great numbers, 100 RBIs. I think he even had in a season of 40 home runs.
Yeah, whenever he was in Texas, you could say he was the best outfielder as far as hitting in the league.
Yeah, definitely some bad luck for the Angels. Definitely good luck that they were able to lock up Mike Trout basically for the entirety of his career. Dippers, as always, be sure to follow us. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify and iTunes. Give us that 5-star review and follow on Instagram and Twitter at The Saucy Pod. This week, we are going to talk a lot about the NCAA tournament, give our predictions for the Final Four, who will be our champion, try to find some sleepers, and talk about teams that have gotten snubbed. On top of the bracket talk, guys, we need you to follow at The Saucy Pod on Twitter, and on there you can find our bracket challenge. You can compete with us and other followers of the show, and it's always kind of fun just to see how everybody shakes out. Also, we will have the second part of the Aaron Elliott interview. I talked last week about quarterbacks. This week it's about wide receivers. Guys, if you liked that talk about the quarterbacks at all, you are in for a treat. We get really in-depth with this wide receiver class. We'll talk a little darts and then wrap up the show, like I said, with our Final Four predictions. So wait and see. The NCAA tournament is underway. Games actually tip off tonight. This is a Tuesday show, by the way, obviously, because I had just gotten back from a full week-long spring training trip. So we'll talk about teams that have gotten snubbed. Obviously, the ACC got a ton of teams in. People are actually arguing that they should have gotten more. Leighton C., who are your biggest snubs for this year?
Probably the snubs go, if you look at TCU and you look at Clemson. Clemson in the ACC and TCU in the Big 12. And you can make the argument that, they could have got in over a team like Belmont, for example, who did win the conference tournament, made the conference. But I'm almost okay that Belmont got in over those teams because we talk about it a lot. You can't punish teams for winning games. And yeah, the OVC is the Ohio Valley Conference. Not going to be a good conference. But it is a good conference, and those teams do get good in the tournament. Basically, it seems like every year they have one team going to 16 almost. So I like it that they put in a Belmont team that won a shit ton of games in the tournament.
Yeah, I definitely like that they got Belmont in there. The only argument I could have with a team that got left out would probably be NC State, just because you look at how Louisville was viewed in the committee's eyes. Louisville got a 7 seed. Everybody coming into this tournament was praising Louisville, saying how they're going to get in, they're a lock. And, you're looking at both of those teams being double-digit loss teams in the ACC. But people are complaining about UNC and NC State and this terrible non-conference schedule. But when you look at their non-conference schedule, it's not their fault that they scheduled teams that absolutely fell flat on their face. You look at a Vanderbilt team that they had scheduled who has a lottery pick in the draft who got hurt 4 games in and wasn't able to win any SEC games, And had they had Darius Garland for the whole entirety of the season, we're looking at a team that's probably in the tournament, bolstering NC State's resume with a win over them. They have a big win over Auburn. They played within 4 points of Wisconsin, who got a 5 seed in this tournament. And at the very end, people are looking at Clemson, NC State. Well, NC State was actually able to beat Clemson at the end, and it was kind of a miraculous comeback. And you thought, with that win, they would absolutely be in the tournament. I think NC State did get snubbed, but I would absolutely hate to see them put an NC State team in over Belmont, who basically took care of business all year and lost some big games like to Purdue. And, they dropped some games along the way that they shouldn't have. But, you really shouldn't be asked to go undefeated just to make the tournament.
No, that's definitely not. Absolutely not. But I feel like the more problem with the seeding, the team that just didn't get in.
No, I agree. And one of the biggest problems people are talking about is that ACC got 3 number 1 seeds, Virginia, Duke, and North Carolina. The last number 1 seed went to Gonzaga. Do you think that the committee got the seeds right?
Yeah, I do. Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, all probably the 3 most deserving teams own number 1 seed. And Gonzaga got the 4th one. Yeah, Gonzaga lost to St. Mary's in the tension of the tournament, but they didn't lose a game for months. And I just look at the thing about Belmont. You shouldn't punish a team for winning the games that are put in front of them. Could they have scheduled some tougher non-conference schedule? Yeah, but they did though. Like, they played Duke and they beat Duke. So I think they're absolutely deserving a number 1 seed.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You look at what Duke did in the ACC tournament. Like, they obviously played well. They had a tough game every single night of the tournament. And, if you evaluate the resume whenever Zion was there, which Zion will be there for the NCAA tournament, they have to be deserving. They have the 2 wins over, they have the win over Virginia, actually 2 of them, and then they have the last win in the ACC tournament against UNC. They have to be in. You really cannot argue the 3 ACC schools getting the 1 seeds, because when you boil it down, they are 3 of the best teams in the country. I think the only argument that we could really have on the number 1 seeds would be if Tennessee actually showed up and played and was able to win that SEC tournament. I don't think that would have changed anything in the eyes of the committee, because realistically, when you look at it, basically nothing over the last week changed anything in the seedings. Like, the teams that were there last week are still there no matter how they played.
Yeah, and the 2 teams that really surprised me for being like that, Michigan State and Auburn. Auburn won the SEC tournament, and they are a 5 seed. Who else did a 5 seed? Mississippi State.
Yes.
Who else did a 5 seed? We got Wisconsin, and we have, where's the other one at? Cannot find it, Drake. Marquette. Marquette had been an absolute free fall over the past 2 months.
Yeah.
Or past month at least. And then a 4 seed above them, I'm fine with those 4 seeds, but Virginia Tech, they should 100% be a 4 seed over Virginia Tech.
Absolutely. I think that if you win your conference tournament, it should play in the role of and it should say something in the eyes of the committee. You look at the teams that won really, really good conference tournaments over this last week. Villanova is a 6 seed, and they won the Big East Championship. Iowa State won the Big 12 Championship. They are a 6 seed as well. And then you look at Auburn, like you said. They are a 5 seed, despite the fact that they won probably the second toughest conference basketball tournament. I know that they, got to avoid LSU and maybe even avoid Kentucky, but they still, at the end of the day, beat a very, very tough Florida team and a Tennessee team that you could realistically argue as a number 1 seed in this tournament. And it's kind of depressing, in effect, just to look at it for these guys who go out there and win these tournaments. Basically to say, hey, we're a lock to be in the NCAA tournament. Basically, nothing we do this next week is going to move the needle on our stock. So what extra incentive on top of the actually just winning the tournament do you really get? Because at the end of the day, you're still going to end up with that seed that you were given a week ago. And in my eyes, that's kind of wrong.
Yeah, and this is the first time in, I think, a couple of years where all the locks for a tournament, like East Conference tournament championship game on Sunday, were locked for the tournament. Michigan State and Michigan. Michigan State, you could say, is the hottest team in the country over the past couple of months, and they're a 2 seed in Duke's bracket. They should be the top 2 seed in Duke's bracket. They beat Michigan 3 times
Yes.
all in 1 month.
Yes.
And Michigan is also Michigan, I think, they're also a 2 seed in Gonzaga's bracket. They should be flip-flopped, or they should be moved with Tennessee or UK. They should not be in the top bracket as a 2 seed.
No, and I agree with that. And you look at the number 1 seeds in this tournament, only one won their conference championship. So to
Well, 3 are in the same conference doesn't help.
but still, I mean, you have a Gonzaga team that couldn't even win the West Coast Conference.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you have 3, but you would think that the 4th would be a team that had won their conference tournament. I would. I don't know the numbers on it. Usually I have these kind of stats for you. I don't know what the numbers are because it would take forever to go back and look. This is probably the first time in, as far as I can remember, a very, very long time that only one team won their conference tournament that is a number 1 seed. I think that it has to play more into that.
So, who are we looking at? Keeping on the Auburn thing and the whole seeding situation. LSU's a 3 seed. Had they won the conference tournament, do you think they would win a 2 seed?
No, I think they would have stayed at a 3.
Okay, who would they have jumped? That's a 2 seed.
Nobody.
Maybe Michigan, that's the only one I can think of. And then you look at Tennessee and UK. If they won it, would they be a 1 seed?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but should they have been? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But if Auburn did not win it, Auburn would be like 7 or 8 seed.
Yeah.
And Auburn's way better than a 7 or 8 seed.
Yeah, I agree.
It all goes to hell with Mississippi State in the same conference as Auburn getting a 5 seed too.
Yeah.
That's when it really goes to shit.
Yeah, I think that the seeding, obviously, you can sit here. We could go on and on and on about it the whole entire show. But I think for the most part, they did a pretty good job. I think that the ACC, getting the 3 teams, I'm glad that they just didn't look at it and say, hey, we can't have 3 teams from one conference. Because at the end of the day, with how the conference tournament shook out, you have to have those ACC schools there. I think the only argument you could really make would be a Gonzaga because the Tennessee does have a head-to-head win against them. All right, Leighton Cecil. I know whenever we broke it down last year, I had like 5 million sleepers. I don't even think there was a sleeper in my bracket once it was all said and done. Everybody basically listens to as much bracket talk as they can to try to get the edge and pick the upsets. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that if you don't have the champion right, you still have bragging rights of finding that sleeper that made it to the Elite 8, possibly Final 4. What teams do you like that are, maybe underdogs in the first round, teams that nobody are really talking about that you think can make a run in this tournament?
Well, I really like Villanova. Villanova is getting a lot of, I don't want to call it hate, a lot of criticism right now, just for no reason. Like, they started the season terrible, and they bounced back in a big way middle of the season, kind of falling back recently. But still Villanova, and Jay likes to go have them ready to go. And looking at who they play, they'll play St. Mary's first, then probably Purdue. I think it definitely gets to the Sweet 16. But as far as like actual super teams go, I think the entire Western division area bracket is just absolutely wide open. Now, like you have in it Syracuse, Murray State, and Florida. I think I can see Florida getting all the way to Sweet 16, maybe in the Elite 8. I see Syracuse getting all the way to Elite 8 and Murray State. Because the teams they play are either very comparable to them, match up well in terms of how they play, or the fact that they play teams that are overseeded because of their conference.
Yeah, I think that there's quite a few sleepers in this thing. Like, obviously, one team that, they are only a 7 seed, so it's not like I'm really reaching off on a limb here, would be Louisville. I really, really like Louisville's chances to make a deep run in this tournament. Obviously, they played the ACC schools throughout their conference schedule, so they are battle-tested. And we just have to fast forward about a month ago to see what this team's potential is. You watch that first half against Duke, and even halfway through the second half, they were absolutely housing Duke. Mm-hmm. And you look at their coach, Chris Mack. Whenever he was at Xavier, anytime that he had a team that came into the tournament with a target on their back, they had early round exits. Yeah, most importantly, I remember they didn't even make it out of the first round whenever they had a number 1 seeded team and a number 2 seeded team. But whenever that team would sneak into the tournament, with double-digit losses, or they came in as a 7 or 9, they were actually able to advance. Anytime he's been outside of a 6 seed in the tournament, the last 2 times that he's been in it, he's made it to the Elite 8, at least, which there are certain coaches that can do that. Tom Izzo is one of those other guys that I think of. Whenever he comes into this tournament with a target on his back, his teams usually fall short of expectations. Chris Mack is the exact same guy. Whenever his team comes in with a ton of expectations, they usually do not live up to those, but he's the kind of coach that can get these guys ready to go and be the hunters, not the hunted, and rally off several wins in this tournament. So I actually really like them to go on a bit of a run. I'm going to stay in the same quadrant here with Liberty. I know what you're probably thinking because it's Liberty, but they play a really, really similar style of basketball to what Virginia does. And basically any team that does that style of basketball has success in the tournament outside of Virginia itself. And you look at how they shoot from the field. This team is very, very efficient offensively. One of the most efficient teams in the country when you look at shooting percentage. So teams that can limit other teams' possession that may have more athletes than them typically bode well in these kind of situations if they can shoot efficiently from the floor. I know that they're put in a kind of a tough spot to open it up, but they're going to be playing Mississippi State right off the bat. Mississippi State is a very, very tough team, but they fell short quite a few times this year. Anytime we kind of get our hopes up on Mississippi State, they start looking good, they jump in the top 25, they'd immediately just fall back down. And then they would play Virginia Tech more than likely in the second round unless they get upset by SLU. And Virginia Tech, since they've been playing without their starting point guard, they have not been the same team. I know they were able to beat Duke recently, but Duke was obviously without Zion. Those are two teams that I think I really like to kind of make a run, maybe a Sweet 16 appearance. Obviously, Leighton hit it at Murray State. Murray State, anytime that you have one of the best players in college basketball, you're going to go on a bit of a run. Latency, I'm going to ask you this. We talk a little bit about sleepers. What team do you see being this year's basically Loyola or this year's George Mason, a team that maybe comes in with a double-digit seed that's going to be able to go on a run, maybe make a Final Four?
Well, I really like Murray State. You already hit at that one, but who I'm going to go with, it doesn't really feel like a Loyola because it's a bigger school, but it's Ohio State. Early in the year, Ohio State's record was 500, but they were like 10th or 12th in all PI because they were playing such a brutal team at the beginning of the season. And then they get bounced back in conference play when they played teams that weren't all just juggernauts and played very well. They have taken it back as of late, but I feel like they get to tournament games, they're a team that could definitely compete with every other team in their bracket. Also, Utah State, they're tough. I like Utah State.
Yeah, Utah State is definitely tough. One team that I don't know if they're going to be able to obviously make a Final Four, but a team that is in position to maybe play weaker opponents would be Belmont. Obviously, Belmont's going to have to win tonight to get that right. I like teams that kind of sneak in. They were just hoping to make it into this tournament. They get announced. Now they're dialed right back in. They're coming off of that loss to Murray State. But Belmont can legitimately go on a run in this tournament just to where they're placed in this bracket. They have excellent big guys, team led by Windler. Windler is a phenomenal player. If you actually watch the championship game against Murray State, you could tell that there were two players that stood out heads and shoulders above everybody else, and that was himself and John Morant. Now, I'm going to probably look like an idiot for saying Belmont because we're going to run this thing out, and they'll lose to Temple in the first round by 20 points. But they're going to go up against a very underwhelming 6 seed whenever you look at the 6 seeds in these brackets in Maryland. And then their second round matchup could potentially be an LSU team that is still playing without their head coach. And you see teams in the past that have been playing without their head coach or their head coach is in a little bit of fire. I just have to look back to last year with Arizona whenever Sean Miller was obviously in hot water, in a lot of trouble. He was still able to coach, but the team just was not the same. And you could realistically see a Louisville, who I talked about earlier, beating Michigan State, giving Belmont a phenomenal route to maybe Elite Eight against Duke, which I believe, didn't Belmont beat Duke before?
I believe it might have been Belmont. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely double check that stat. But I'm almost positive Belmont has beat Duke before. Obviously, you can throw that stuff out the window. But a team like Belmont could seriously go on a run just because they're put, I think, in a very, very weak spot of the bracket.
In 2011, they lost to Duke by 1 point.
1 point. Okay. I really do like Belmont, though, as a sleeper.
So you think that Belmont has potential to beat Belmont and get to the Final Four?
Yeah, I do. I actually really like that Belmont team.
Really puts up this bracket?
Yeah, I think they could bust up a lot of people's brackets.
You do know if they lose to the 10 point, making a song about this, right?
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know. I've seen this story before, and I know how it ends.
Yeah, the other party can make a song out of?
Yes, actually, I do. Blake Bortles, smartest man in the NFL. Go play backup under the tutelage of Sean McVay this season. Next season, become an NFL head coach. Chicago Bears, sign HaHa Clinton Dix. Next, we need him to move to wide receiver and the Bears to re-sign Jay Cutler. He and Jay Cutler had quite a connection for years while Cutler was with the Bears. It is officially NCAA tournament season. Things you've learned from this entire season, throw them all out the window because nothing for the next 3 weeks will make any sense. John from accounting. He will win your bracket challenge, and you'll hear about it for the next 3 years, despite the fact that he had no idea who Zion Williamson even is. Mark my words, when you go into work on Monday, some guy that you can always rely to tell you a story that you've never gonna believe will start off the story with, I had a perfect bracket, until. Le'Veon Bell. First NFL running back to lose out on $18 million based off of principle. LeBron James, 9 games out of the playoffs, still missing games for load management. Resting yourself for the offseason is a strategy I've actually never seen before. There are 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and an absolute home run interview from John Calipari on Selection Sunday. And there's actually a new song out this week. It's on Le'Veon Bell's SoundCloud, and it's titled, Started from the Top, Now We're Here. And those have been my thoughts. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the NFL a little bit. Big blockbuster trade. Anytime a top, probably 20 player in the NFL gets traded, it warrants us to discuss. Odell Beckham Jr. was traded to the Cleveland Browns for Jabril Peppers, a first-round pick, and a third-round pick. Does this make the Browns a legitimate contender and maybe even the favorite for the AFC North?
I think they're probably favorite for the AFC North right now because Steelers, just lost Bell. But they didn't even have Bell last year. Lost Antonio Brown, who's maybe the best team in football. And the Ravens just did a lot of moves I don't understand this offseason. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But I think they're probably most definitely the best team in the AFC North. But I wouldn't be surprised if the AFC North is very underwhelming this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the AFC North is going to be in a lot of trouble. I think before this OBJ trade, you could realistically make an argument for the Browns to win it. In fact, I would have thought that the Browns would have won it before this trade. Now you go ahead and pair him with the talent that they got. Obviously, Kareem Hunt will only be there for 6 games, but they have Nick Chubb and Duke Johnson, who are absolutely phenomenal pieces for that offense. Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Baker Mayfield has no reason not to take the next step this year, which we've seen quarterbacks in the past kind of have a sophomore slump after their first year. It's almost impossible to do with this wide receiver talent, with this running back talent that they have.
The O-line's good.
The O-line's good.
Baker Mayfield should... I'm not saying he can be an MVP. He should be able to have an MVP-type season, though.
Oh, I agree 100%. And honestly... Eli Manning could freaking succeed in this offense with as good as they are. This offense is phenomenal, and I think Baker Mayfield showed us a lot last year that he does have what it takes to succeed. I honestly, I'm not going to be surprised if we're not seeing. I will be. I hate to say it because it feels so weird to say. I would not be surprised if the Browns are playing for an AFC championship next year.
No, I agree with you. You could totally 100% make the argument. The outside quarterback, this offense is more talented than the one with Peyton Manning and Wes Welker and Julius Thomas and Marius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. They have more talent than they do.
Yeah.
Can Baker not throw that pick in the fourth quarter? Can he convert that 3rd and 14 that's in the game. Can he do those things now?
Yeah, and you look at what else they got from the Giants. They got Olivier Vernon. And, last year people just talked about, man, if this defense gets a second edge rusher behind Myles Garrett, this defense is going to be elite. Well, they went out there and they got him. I mean, Olivier Vernon, he might not be a guy who will be the absolute best pass rusher on your team for a good defense, but if he's your number 2 guy rushing the passer, hell yeah, sign me up. So I think that the Browns finally have everything to succeed. Now we're just going to have to see if Freddie Kitchens and Baker Mayfield can take that next step and put this team basically on the map for the first time in a very, very long time. The Giants really don't have a clear plan, though. They've let young talent basically walk away without anything. Where do they go from here?
It'd be very good for them if Trevor Lawrence would got to LF after this season. That would be ideal for them. But I would not take a quarterback this year. I would just pick in the draft, build up a small defense, maybe get offensive lineman, something. But there's no point in taking Dwayne Haskins. I'm assuming Kyle Murray won't be there at that point. But I'm going to take Dwayne Haskins because can you say confidently say that Dwayne Haskins is going to be worth the 6th pick in the draft?
No, we talked about it last week with Aaron Elliott.
You can't necessarily say he's going to be as good as Eli Manning is this year. I think he would be better, but you can't sit and say it with confidence. So I think they should take a piece this year, try to get maybe a finish it next year, just hold over because they got to get a quarterback, and everybody knows Trevor Lawrence is 2 years away.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Basically take the Browns strategy. The Browns, they built up and they got talent, acquired talent. Now we're going to get our quarterback. Basically the same motto that the Bears had done. Acquire talent, then get your quarterback. I feel like if you get a quarterback now and you maybe slate Dwayne Haskins in for the last few games of this season, or if he plays at all, or if he starts off next year playing behind that awful offensive line, you're going to have a gun-shy quarterback back there. And we've seen it time and time again. My favorite instance is Derek Carr. Anytime you throw a young guy back there who's going to get sacked a ton of times, they are never the same player after those kind of experiences because then they start to develop bad habits, trying to get the ball out there too early, which is a thing. They're not wanting to take the deep shots downfield because they know that somebody's going to be breathing down their neck. It turns into a mess. I think that the Giants, they did get out from underneath that OBJ contract. They did get Jabril Peppers, who you could realistically argue has the value of a number 1 pick. Mm-hmm. And then they did get picks on top of that. I think they just need to acquire talent, ride this ship with Eli Manning for the last year, and then start looking towards the future. I don't think your answer is in this class outside of Kyler Murray. So we'll go ahead and talk about Le'Veon Bell. The man has finally been paid, but it was a lot less than what he had hoped for. Originally, the Steelers had him on track to make about $70 million over the same number of seasons, but he has signed a 4-year, $52 million deal with the Jets. He'll get an annual bonus of $2 million and an annual salary of $13.5. What were your thoughts on this deal?
I was surprised it happened when it did. I figured it took a few more days because I figured he wanted to get the price up as high as possible. But they must have just been dead. Like, they just had to have called and said, this is our offer. It's not going anywhere. Sat on that for 2 or 3 days. I know it's been a better offer. But, Le'Veon Bell, he got guaranteed money, which is what he wanted. So, yeah, he lost $14 million from last year. Never get that money back. But he got his guaranteed money for 4 years, so I guess in 4 years, when he retires, he'll be happy.
Yeah, you look at a guy who basically put the Steelers in a really bad spot too, Antonio Brown. Everybody comes back and says like, oh, Antonio Brown pulled off the ultimate heist on the Steelers. He definitely did what he had set out to do. Le'Veon Bell did the exact opposite. And there were reports that the Jets had actually given him a deadline to whenever he could sign his deal. And it comes out really, really bizarre that Le'Veon Bell decided to take this deal basically on the last second of the day. He took the deal about right around midnight. I guess it would have been on Tuesday night. So it makes me speculate that potentially the Jets said, hey, we're going to rescind this offer on Wednesday if you don't take it. So I think he took it on the last second that he possibly could have. And people had said how it was basically a 2-horse race with the Ravens and the Jets. And then immediately following the signing, they come out and they say, well, the Ravens never made a real offer towards him. So it kind of makes it think that the Jets were the only people that were willing to pay even close to what he had asked, and it's realistically not that close to what he was wanting. He was wanting a deal worth about $17 million, and he got $13.5 over 4 years. I think that he was maybe the biggest loser of this free agency, seeing that he's going to miss out on about $18 million that he could have had he had played last year and continued to stay on the Steelers. For the entirety of his, 30s and basically his running back shelf life in the NFL. So what do you think about the Jets? I know that they had made quite a few deals. They did get C.J. Mosley. They did get Jamison Crowder. Do you think that the Jets are going to, maybe not contend for a title, but maybe push the Patriots a little bit this season?
I like the Jets a lot with this summer, winter, whatever we call it, season. I like it a lot. I don't know if next time we'll talk about it now. So, not only did they get Le'Veon Bell, they also got Jay Crowder, who is a very good target, a very long target, gets a ton of catches for who quarterback is. And then you got C.J. Mosley, who is, I think, the top 3 or 4 linebackers in football, still really young, him for 4 more years. Now it's on Sam Darnold, like it's on Baker Mayfield. Mayfield probably has more pressure than Darnold does this year, but Darnold, he didn't pick up on the draft. He was the USC beautiful quarterback. Second year, gotta do something.
Yeah,
I think the Jets can win 10 games. I do, but Darnold, like I said, with Baker Mayfield, 4th and 3rd and 13. Can you get that 4th quarter? Can you not throw a pick?
Yeah, I think obviously I've talked the praises of Sam Darnold on this show about 1 million times. So obviously I think that they have the quarterback for the foreseeable future for this team. Le'Veon Bell does a lot for this offense. This offense really hasn't had that steady running back that they could consistently hand the ball to, 20 times, let alone even like 15 times. Now they have a guy that they can basically ride until the cows come home, and they get help on defense on top of Deron Lee, on top of Jamal Adams. Like, they are starting to get a lot of really good pieces, and they're all really young. I really like the Jamison Crowder move because they really didn't have a wide receiver that, on those short downs that they could get the ball to, and, he's going to catch it about 90% of the times that you throw it his way, and he's going to convert those downs. Yes, they have Quincy Enunwa, but other than running, a 50-yard go route, Quincy Enunwa is really not going to do shit for your football team. So I like the Le'Veon Bell move. I like the Jamison Crowder move. Obviously, C.J. Mosley, being as skilled as what he is, does help this team out a lot. I think this is a team that's probably going to win 7 or 8 football games this year. But once they get those guys in the offense and, Sam Darnold gets acquainted with them, I think this is a team that in 2-3 years from now, we're going to be talking about them as a front runner in their own division, which actually has the Patriots in it too.
This is, of all the teams I'm curious about what they're going to do in the draft, the Jets are up there with the most curious. Because the Jets, like we talked about, I think they won 8 games. I can see them streaking out with 1 or 2 more. What will they do to get that next game, or will they try to do that?
So, what team would you say had the best free agency this year?
I think the Jets had the best free agency this year for sure. They got 3, and they got more than 3 impact players that are going to be from just day one, who are going to be immediate contributors in a big way to that team.
I agree. I think that the Jets are actually your biggest winners here. And it's kind of because there was a string of luck involved. They had Anthony Barr basically back out at the last second. I think that's a blessing in disguise because now you get Le'Veon Bell for right around, instead of using that money on Anthony Barr, who I get it. Anthony Barr is a really, really good football player, but you already have a really good linebacking core. Yes, he's going to help that, but you didn't have anything at running back for the next probably 3 years unless you go spend a draft pick on one. So I think by luck, the Jets, I think they're going to come out on top in this whole situation. All right, so we had the biggest winner. Who do you think was the biggest loser of this free agency period?
I want to call him a loser, but this is what they were trying to do, so I can't really call him a loser, but the Ravens. I just didn't understand what they're trying to do. They cut Eric Weddle and signed Earl Thomas. That's an upgrade, in my opinion. Earl Thomas did,
for about 4 times the amount of money, though.
They get hurt last year. They cost more, but I still think it's an upgrade. And then they just let C.J. Mosley go. I think they did that because they thought they were going to go get Le'Veon Bell. I thought they really thought that. They mostly signed like the Jets before Bell signed. And they're like, okay, well, we can't get him now. And Bell's gone, so they signed Mark Ingram for $5 million a year, who's 29 years old. So they didn't need Mark Ingram. They have Gus Edwards, who was very silver last year. And the thing of that team is the defense. The defense doesn't let the team score above 18 points, so Lamar Jackson has to produce more than 18 points. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, yeah, he can run the football really well, but at some point in time, he has to throw the football. So what do they do for that? Cut Crabtree, cut John Brown, and bring no one else in. I just don't understand what their plan was. They were my pick to win the AFC North going into next season. I thought, okay, they have Mosley and Weddle and good pieces. Draft maybe 1 or 2 more, and if they can contribute, AFC North champions. Now, they might be worse than the Steelers.
Yeah. I actually agree with you. I really don't like what the Ravens did at all. Obviously, you have a guy like C.J. Mosley, who probably should have been your number 1 priority to bring back. Mm-hmm. You don't get him back. And then Terrell Suggs has been basically the backbone of this defense, maybe not physically, but from a mental standpoint, a guy who's been with this team when they've won titles, they let him walk out the door. And then you bring in an Earl Thomas who was flipping off his own team sideline whenever he gets hurt and he's going to lose out on money. And he's the replacement for a guy who lost out on $1 million paycheck because his team did not did not make it into the playoffs. This was 2 years ago. Eric Weddle, he had $1 million bonus if they made it to the playoffs. He got asked about that $1 million bonus and he jumped down the reporter's throat because he did not think that the money was important. He was pissed off that they were being left out of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So the mentality change on this team is going to be huge. You're looking at a Mark Ingram who's going to come in. He's 29 years old. He's right at the edge of 30, where running backs, unless they're Adrian Peterson, don't have success past the age of 30. I think what they really did was weird. And they used a ton of running backs last year, and it worked. And now you're going to bring Mark Ingram in, who's going to expect to be basically the featured guy in an offense where they're going to use multiple pieces. Kind of strikes me like back whenever the Saints brought in Adrian Peterson, and he came in wanting to be this workhorse and was highly disappointed whenever he found out that they were going to use about 3 guys in that backfield instead of just ride him until the cows come home. I don't like what the Ravens did. I think the Ravens are going to regress a lot. Once game film comes out on Lamar Jackson, teams are going to have a whole entire offseason to prepare for it. I will not be surprised at all if this team is not a bottom feeder in their division.
No, I can see
I think they'll be right along with the Bengals.
I can see Lamar Jackson totally flopping this year and them being 6-10, 7-9.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and stay with the football mindset here. We have Aaron Elliott in for part 2 of his interview. We're going to talk about quarterbacks this week. Obviously, Aaron has worked, or we're going to talk about wide receivers this week. Talked about quarterbacks last week. Aaron's worked with some of the best players in football. He's worked with Nike Elite 11 camps. He runs camps of his own. Guys, I really hope you enjoy the second half of this interview because it is as good as the first we had for you last week. So we'll go ahead and we'll go to wide receivers here. One of the guys that jumps off the page, obviously, if you just look at combine numbers, DK Metcalf, wide receiver from Ole Miss. Absolutely stunned at the combine. Had a 40.5-inch vertical, ran a 4.33 40. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, 1.6% body fat. 3 wide receivers out of the top 20 last year that caught 900 yards or more. Only 3 of those 20 guys did not have a 1,000-yard receiving season in college. Do you think DK Metcalf can be that next guy despite not having 1,000 yards in college?
That's a really good question. And if I was a general manager, I'd be really trying to figure that out. The issue with Metcalf is he quick twitched enough to get open? From a perspective of, yeah, you can run straight down a line. However, a lot of routes are run in the NFL 15 yards and less. And from a perspective of outside receivers, we're all looking for big, people that evaluate talent in the NFL are all looking for big, tall, fast, and strong hands, and big hands. If you have all of those, you're going to be falling in love with, I don't want to jump off the page and change the person you're talking about, but you take someone like Hakeem Butler, he was the tallest and the biggest and like the second or third fastest. And if it wasn't for Metcalf putting up these ultra crazy numbers, everyone would be talking about Hakeem Butler out of Iowa State. Everybody. But because Metcalf put up these numbers that people have basically never seen before at 200, what do you weigh in, like 228 pounds or something to that extent?
Yeah, and he was massive.
What was it?
I said he was massive. I think he actually weighed in at like 233.
Okay, yeah. He was in the high 220s, low 230s, and then ran the 4.33 at, I think he was like 6'3" and a half. He wasn't a full 6'4". So when you take all of that perspective and that picture went viral of him and Brown, the other inside slot receiver from Ole Miss, about how rocked up they are physically, people fall in love with that stuff. But the only downside to it is can he get open? Because there's so much of the game that's played within 15 yards. And at a guy that's big, tall, strong, and fast, personally, there are other receivers that I would draft over Metcalf. That I would take over Metcalf. One of them, we talked about N'Keal Harry. I like him out of Arizona State. And as the aforementioned, the kid from Iowa State, both of them have physical capabilities that are similar to Metcalf's, that may have a little bit more athleticism. And, when you speak of N'Keal Harry, you're talking about a guy that returns punts as well, super athletic, maybe not as big, maybe not as fast, but from a perspective of, just pure pass catching ability, I liked his ability to track the ball a little bit better at the combine than I did Metcalf's. And I honestly thought Metcalf was tight in the hips a little bit. I didn't, for a guy as big, tall, strong, and fast as he is, I didn't like his fluidity. I didn't like the way he moved all that much. He just was so big and so tall and so fast and so thick that he had a hard time moving. And so, and I don't mean moving as in running. I mean just moving, getting in and out of breaks, doing the gauntlet with the quarterbacks. I didn't like the way that he moved in some of those drills as much as I would. And when I say I don't like it, I mean I don't like it from a top 5 pick perspective. He should, with his numbers, he should no doubt 100% be a top 5 pick. And will he produce with that? And I know you and I had a previous conversation about this. How many big receivers really produce in the NFL? Everyone loves Calvin Johnsons. Everyone loves, the Julio Joneses and the A.J. Greens. The truth is, though, we're all looking for those, they're all looking for those people. The truth is there are very few of them that have actually been ultra successful in the NFL. Very few.
So you actually mentioned with the his quick twitch and all that, him maybe not being good in like a 3-cone drill or, the 20-yard shuttle. Actually, you look at whenever Tom Brady came to be drafted and he had his combine workout and all that, his combine numbers in those short shuttles and 3-cone drills were actually better than DK Metcalf's, which obviously Tom Brady was not a fast guy, not a quick guy by any stretch of the imagination. But how eye-opening is that a guy like Tom Brady was actually quicker, if you will, than DK Metcalf?
I mean, you got me on that one. I had no idea that his 3-cone shuttle was slower than Brady's. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, from a perspective, again, the 3-cone and then maybe even the 20-yard shuttle, he didn't explode like you would like to see a receiver do. He was a little tight in the hips. He was a little bit just big. And every player, and this is what I tell people all the time, okay? So this is what I say all the time, is that we are all, or, people that evaluate talent. Our job is to find what players don't do well and exploit that and dive into that, right? Our job really is not really to tell people what they do well. It's what they don't do well, right? And so from a perspective of looking for kids, and you're trying to evaluate and say, overall, is this kid that good of a player? He has a lot of physical upside. He has a lot of ability to catch the ball. He's got strong hands. He had big hands. I mean, his hands were 9 7/8 inches, right? A right under 10-inch hand. Good sized hands. Weighed 228 at the combine. His arms were 34 7/8. Well, he had long arms and big hands, and so he's a big-bodied receiver. The issue is how successful have those big-body receivers been without being quick-twitched? And I can tell you, I can only think of 3, maybe 4 of those that have been successful. There's been a lot of them drafted, but none of them have an equate to. I kind of relate him to like a Corey Davis. Corey Davis was far more successful at the Division I level, and Corey Davis had a very below par average rookie year because he was hurt. Last year he had a better year, but physically they're very similar in size. Corey Davis is 6'3", weighs around 220. He had 9.5 hands and had like 33 and a half arms. So very similar in size, very whatever. Now, he wasn't rocked up like Metcalf, but still at the end of the day, if you're going to take a player with that kind of skill set, you're going to draft him in the top 10. And has Corey Davis been a top 10 player in the NFL for his position? And
Absolutely
I would argue that he hasn't been able to reach that potential yet.
Right.
Not saying he won't, but I'm just saying he hasn't made it there yet.
Right.
So if we fast forward in 2 years, is that draft pick that high worth Metcalf, worth taking, at that level?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think that it is. I unfortunately, fortunately for him, I think people will end up taking him that high, thinking and hoping that they can transition this guy. Now, hey, if Al Davis was still around, there's no doubt in my mind that the Raiders would be scooping him up with their first pick. They may even be moving up to number 1 to take DK Metcalf, if that was the case.
Oh, yeah. I would 100% agree with that.
Yes. So one guy that you talked about actually was Akeem Butler. You look at, one thing that jumps off to you about DK Metcalf, obviously, that he was averaging 22 yards per reception prior to his injury, that he was obviously, this such an explosive player. One guy that I think that's going to fly under the radar, what you talked about, was Akeem Butler, who averaged that same exact yards per catch just for the longevity of a season, was able to get 1,000 yards. Do you think that a guy like him, who is, a physical specimen, who is 6'6", who is 230 pounds, do you think that he will project out better in the NFL once their careers are said and done?
I like him better personally. Yeah, I think he's a little bit more of a fluid athlete. I know there's the kid from Stanford that's got I can't remember, he's got 3 names. I think he's a good player too. But personally, I like him as a player. I like N'Keal Harry. And the kid we talked about, Akeem Butler, more than I do Metcalf at the next level. And it's just a personal preference. It's a preference that we'll see what happens. But I have a hard time falling in love with guys that run 3-cone drills. Because think about it from this perspective. That 3-cone drill is running to a point, stopping, and then starting and changing directions. What's the number one thing receivers do? They run to a point, stop, and change directions.
No, absolutely. And if you look across NFL, the smaller guys usually have better success with that.
100%. And the smaller guys tend to be more successful. I mean, I can go on and on and on about guys that are 6 foot or 6'1" and shorter. I mean, I can start. We can take Edelman for T.Y. Hilton. who's the kid that plays for the Saints right now that plays inside? Brandon Cooks. Whoever plays for the Saints right now, whatever his name is, the inside slot for the Saints. Those guys have had a lot of success, and they're 6 foot tall or 6'1" tall. Like, they're not 6'3", 230-pound. What we consider, freaks, really. I mean, they're in the anomaly to the world, but to the anomaly to the world hasn't necessarily always transitioned and translated to NFL success.
Right. No, I definitely agree with that. So, we've kind of talked about the bigger body wide receivers.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and talk about guys who may be, 6'2" or shorter, guys who maybe fit the NFL mold better in today's game, without being able to hand check and all that. You got Hunter Renfrow, Marquise Brown, Anthony Johnson. I know he's a little bigger. He's in that 6'2" range. Guys like that. Who do you like the most out of those smaller wide receivers that might not jump off the page just off their measurables?
Yeah, Marquise Brown is a really electric player out of Oklahoma. He did play with two really good quarterbacks, and Murray and Mayfield. He's a really electric player with a lot of speed. Ran a lot of crossing routes at Oklahoma. Was really designed to run a lot of crossing routes all the way across the field, so they could take advantage of his speed. Renfrow is a tricky one, man. He performed really well at the Senior Bowl. He came back and did well at the Combine as well. So I think you'll see Hunter Renfrow drafted on day 2 of the draft. I really do. I don't think he'll go day 1 in first round, but I could see someone taking Renfrow in the 2nd or 3rd round, a 5'10" white guy who's balding. He's going bald, and he looks like he's about 30-something years old, but he just plays ball. And coaches and GMs and people of that nature love people that just play well, and do everything right. And he's one of those type of guys. And if I was drafting anybody, now I'm not a general manager, but if I was drafting any player in the NFL right now, I would draft Hunter Renfrow. The guy won. What Clemson won? What? He made it to the national playoffs all 4 years he was there. He won the national championship. 2 years ago when he caught the pass? They won the national championship again this past year. He might have been there for 5 years, but point is he's won every year he's been there. He did everything right. I'll tell you a little hint that I don't know about Hunter Renfrow. The head coach of Clemson is Dabo Swinney. Hunter Renfrow is roommates with Dabo Swinney's son at Clemson. The reason why I bring that up is, do you think Dabo Swinney would let his son, live with someone that didn't have an unbelievably amount of high character?
No, I agree. I agree.
So if I had one draft pick, if someone said draft one person in this NFL draft, I would draft Hunter Renfrow. 100%. He was successful on the field. He caught a lot of passes. He won at every level. He won in high school. He was a multi-sport athlete in high school. And he lived with Dabo Swinney's son in college. So they're not going to, again, he's not going to let him live with somebody who's not doing the right thing. So I personally love Hunter Renfrow, and maybe it's based on the success of Cooper Kupp and other people that are similar to Hunter Renfrow's body style and the way he plays the game. The one thing that he's not uber, like Julian Edelman is uber quick twitch. He's pretty talented when it comes to running the 40 and just being an athletic player. He's not that type of player, but what he does do is he runs and he stays in his breaks and is able to keep his speed. He's 4.5 to his break, and then he breaks at 4.6 and goes right back to 4.5, which is incredible. He does not lose a lot of speed on his breaks, and just finds a way to get open. And at the end of the day, if I have a kid on my team that I'm coaching or I'm the general manager of, I want a kid I know is going to do the right thing, that's dependable, and I think a year from now we're going to get back and go, Hunter Renfrow had 700 yards as a rookie and got drafted in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't be surprised with that. And if you look at the production that Hunter Renfrow, he maybe have the oddest career of any college football player. two of his most productive games, the only games that he caught 2 touchdowns or more in, were the game against Alabama 2 years ago and the game against Alabama a season ago. So those were his 2 most productive games. I mean, he had 17 catches in those 2 games with 170 receiving yards or 180 receiving yards with the 2 touchdowns on top of that in both games. Do you think that, people will look at that and say that this is like a big game wide receiver, which in the NFL, every single game is a huge game, and they think that he will be able to, create similar stats at the next level just because he is such a big game wide receiver?
Here's what I will tell you. He's doing it against teams like Alabama. You don't think those guys at Alabama play coverage are not going to play in the NFL? So, that's the thing, is he's doing it against competition. If he was doing it against, South Carolina State or Furman or something like that, no, he was able to produce against Alabama. Now, I don't care who you are. If you can get open against Alabama inside slot safeties, outside linebackers, if you can get open against those guys, you can get open against anybody. Those guys are just as talented as the guys that are playing in the NFL on the outside.
Right.
So, I don't know necessarily no big game per se. I don't necessarily get into the whole fact that it was a big game. He shows up on a big game. What I think, to me, shows he was able to produce against kids that were just as talented as kids that are going to be able to play in the NFL. And if he can get open against those guys, he can get open in the NFL.
Right, because, if you look at the NFL at the defensive back positions, basically it's an SEC all-star team. And, whenever I look at Renfro's stats, obviously he played in the ACC, so he rarely got games against the SEC opponents, which do have the upper echelon of defensive backs in college football. And if you just look at his just sheer yardage production, 6 of his 15 biggest games in college were against SEC competition.
Yeah, and I think it just proves the fact that he can get open.
Yes, I absolutely love it. So we talked about DK. We actually talked before we got on air. You said that you don't think DK Metcalf will be the first wide receiver taken in the NFL draft. Who do you think will be that wide receiver that is taken first out of the wide receiver class for this year?
Probably JJ. I can't say his last name. Arquette Whiteside.
Yeah, Arcega-Whiteside. He's one of my favorites.
Whiteside. Yeah, him or N'Keal Harry or Hakeem Butler. I just have this weird feeling that someone is going to find that DK Metcalf is not athletic enough. And I could be crazy on this. We might look back on this 2 months from now and be like, okay, Aaron, you were 100% wrong. But I just have this weird feeling that he is not going to end up being the first receiver off the board. And so if I'm right, then we'll sit back here and go, wow, I was a draft guru and I knew everything. But from a perspective of what I saw at the combine, don't forget, running fast. There are guys that, he ran a 4.33 and a 4.39. Those were his 2.40 times. There are guys that run 4.6s all the time that are successful in the NFL. So you have to just a little bit, you have to hold your horses just a little bit. I'll give you an example. How good has John Ross been in the NFL right now?
Not very good.
Yeah, well, he just got traded, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I didn't see that. He might have. He deserves to be traded.
Yeah, but he's been awful for the Bengals, right? They traded up for him. He's going to be an electrical playmaker, and he ran 4.22 in the 40, and hasn't been very good.
Yes.
And I can go on and on and on about people like that really Tavon Austin is the same type of player, as Ross, electric, super fast, and he's been okay, but he was average for the Rams. The Rams dealt him to, he was good for whoever he played for before the Rams dealt him. And the point is that realistically speaking, there's a level of speed. Let's just say that you need to run at least a 4.640 to be successful. or a 4.65. There's a level of speed at 4.65 that you need. Once you become that fast, you're fast enough. I think it's more so important when you're looking at combine numbers to understand that you're either big enough or fast enough, or you're not. And that's kind of where the issue lies with people like Kyler Murray. Everybody's worried about that he's 5'10". The reason why they're worried about it is because in factual data and analytics, he's not been 5'10", 207 has not been big enough to be successful in the NFL. It's just a matter of, are you big enough? Are you fast enough? And if you're fast enough, I love, Arcetta Whiteside, N'Keal Harry, and Butler all over Metcalf. And I don't do this enough to sit there and say, with a vengeance that Metcalf won't be the first one off the board. But I can sit here and tell you for sure that those other guys, I feel like, will have better NFL careers next year.
Yeah, I honestly agree with that. And just on your 40 time alone, Jerry Rice, 4.740. 4.740. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, once you're fast enough, you're fast enough. And a guy like Renfro that you talked about earlier, how fast do you come in and out of your breaks? Like, he is running his top end speed throughout the entirety of his route. So there's been a hot topic in the NFL right now about Antonio Brown. Do you think that all this fire around Antonio Brown will affect the draft stock of a player that is actually his cousin, who they have a very close relationship? AB was at multiple Oklahoma games this year with Marquise Brown. Do you think people will see that and maybe be turned off to the fact that he has that close relationship?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I don't know. All I know is Antonio Brown just got paid.
Yes. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
So, he's obviously an ultra talented player. He's probably considered the best receiver right now in the NFL. Is an explosive receiver, but he did just get paid. So Marquise Brown, I can't speak to. I did just take a couple seconds to look up Hunter Renfro's speed. And Hunter Renfro ran a 4.5940. Well, that's pretty darn fast.
Yes.
You talk about doing a laser time 40 at 4.59. That's pretty darn fast. So, Marquise Brown is fast. The only issue with Marquise Brown is he's really, really small. He checked in at 166 pounds and 5'8.25".
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and so he's really, really small. And the only comparison people can really find on that is Deshaun Jackson. And Deshaun Jackson was, 169 pounds. But I don't think Marquise Brown is as electric as Deshaun Jackson was. Nor do I think he's as fast. So Deshaun Jackson is just an unbelievable player.
Right. And Deshaun Jackson realistically could be, a once-in-a-lifetime type talent as far as going and getting the deep ball.
Yeah.
So, last question here for the wide receivers. Who will be the biggest draft bust when we look back at this draft class 5 years from now? Metcalf?
100%.
I agree with that.
I think that people are falling in love with his ability and all that stuff, but I 100% think he will be. I'll give you one off the board that I like for success. If you want kind of an off the name like we did last time.
Oh yeah.
Hey, quarterbacks. I'll give you one. David Sills, West Virginia.
Oh yeah.
He was a quarterback in high school and actually committed to USC it was offered a quarterback scholarship as a 7th grader.
Lane Kiffin. Yeah. That's wild.
Then he went to community. He went to junior college while he played. He had a great year at wide receiver. Went to a junior college and played quarterback. Had no offers, and then West Virginia offered him to come back as a receiver again, and he took it. So David Sills, I like his athleticism. He's tall, strong hands, fast. He's a mid-round receiver that I feel could have production in the next 3 to 5 years.
Correct me if I'm wrong, whenever I see him play, It's very Devontae Adams-like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that 100%.
I really like him.
I think I like him as a player. He tracks the ball well. He runs fast enough. He's big. But Sills is a guy that is not getting a ton of love right now. But he's a guy I think as the draft process plans out, draft process is kind of weird. And this is what happens. Is you have the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine, you have all the bowl games, then you have the Combine, and then you have these pro days. Well, these scouts are out on the road over the next month, hitting all of these pro days, and they basically are all in March, and then April they go back to their teams, relay the information. But what happens is people really start separating themselves, and teams really start to zone in on players. And for most of the time, if you are interviewing the player, they have a fairly good idea of 2 or 3 teams that are probably going to draft them. And so what happens is, it's like anything else. It's a job interview for these players, and people sometimes forget it truly is a job interview. It's an incredibly public job interview. It's a long job interview, if you will. It's several months for these players. But the players, at the end of the day, they have an opportunity. It only takes one team to fall in love with you. It only takes one opportunity. And you have to, if you think about it, last year, Baltimore, I'll give you a prime example. So there were, like I said, we mentioned earlier, 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Baltimore traded back into the first round last year to get Lamar Jackson. Was there any other team that had the number 32 draft pick going to draft Lamar Jackson? Probably not.
Right.
But Baltimore fell in love with Lamar Jackson and felt he was a first-round talent. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about in the sense that it only takes one team. The Colts last year drafted Darius Leonard in the second round. And I know we talked about this a little bit offline. No one expected the Colts last year to do what they did. They won, 9-10 games in a row, made it to the second round of the playoffs. They're 10 out of the last 11 or whatever it was. Well, a big reason for that is their draft class. They drafted Quentin Nelson at 6 overall, who was an NFL Pro Bowler. They drafted Leonard in the second round, and they drafted another lineman in the second round. And all 3 of those players started every single game in 2018. Started and played, and they picked a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro. A lot of listeners may not know the difference. The Pro Bowler is selected by the fans with the help of some of the coaches and the general managers. All-Pro is done strictly by the NFL. So he was an All-Pro, led the NFL in tackles, was out of South Carolina State, and was drafted in the second round. So it only takes – do you think that there were other teams in the NFL that had a second-round grade on Darius Leonard? From what I gathered and from what it was told was – a lot of people thought he was going to be a third-round grade or a fourth-round grade.
Yeah, it was deemed the worst second-round pick out of the draft.
100%. And now look who's laughing.
Yeah.
So when you take players, it only takes one coach. A lot of people. Chris Ballard was criticized last year of the Colts, and I'm biased. I'm a Colts fan, but he was criticized last year by taking a guard at 6 overall.
Oh, yeah. They did.
A guard is a low-profile position. It is not a high-dollar position. He was criticized for that. But they needed instant help on the offensive line. And at the end of the day, he ended up being a Pro Bowler. So if you could say I can draft a Pro Bowler in the first round of the NFL draft, you are hitting it on the head every year.
No, I agree. And they basically broke 2 of the cardinal sins of the NFL draft that people have basically beaten to your head over the last, 50 years. You don't take a guard in the top 10, which they did, and you don't take a guy who didn't play in the, he played in the 1AA or FCS or whatever you will, in the first 2 rounds. So 2 of the things that people don't historically do, they did, and it panned out. All they did was go get their guys that fit into their mold, and it pans out in your playoff team.
And they did exactly. They did their research. They felt that those guys were who they wanted. Quentin Nelson was not the 6th best player overall in the NFL draft. I know this for a fact, but Quentin Nelson was number 1 on the Colts board.
Wow.
Number 1. All positions, number 1 on the board. So from that perspective, they took the guy that they felt was the best player in the class. At number 6 overall, they felt was the best player overall. Were there other kids that were, people watching the draft and like, oh, I can't believe they took a guard at number 6 overall? Absolutely. But they took the best player that they felt was best for them to grow successfully. And at the end of the day, they made it to the playoffs in 2018. And I'm assuming that they're even going to be better in 2019 because they played a lot. They had, one of the, of course, again, I'm a Colts fan, but they had one of the youngest rosters in the NFL. Probably the youngest.
Yeah, and paying the least as well.
100%. And Chris Ballard was successful. He was in Philadelphia. Then he came over to Kansas City, and then he was in Kansas City. He was successful in Kansas City. He has found a way to locate players like Tyreek Hill. People don't give him credit. He was there when he drafted Tyreek Hill, right? And he has found a way to find players that are making major impacts in the NFL. And we're off the radar type guys.
Right.
Darius Leonard was off the radar. Was he going to be, I don't want to mislead your listeners, was he going to be drafted? Absolutely. The key was he was drafted in the 2nd round, taken off the board, and then criticized for doing it. They went offensive line and linebacker their first 3 picks in the NFL draft last year, and all 3 of them started every single game in 2018. They found 3 starters, and if you could do that in your first 3 picks every year, your life would, the teams would be a lot, you'd be a lot more successful. The problem is, this happens all the time, that there are kids drafted in the first 2 rounds that play 30% of the time.
Right. No, I agree. And most of those first-round picks, you basically just get washed away within the first few years because they don't get to see the field. And, they took position needs.
Or maybe they do see the field, but they're not as successful as people thought they were going to be. Or whatever. And if you continually miss, the best way to turn you, the thing that makes the NFL great, okay, and I say this all the time, the NBA is different because the NBA is demanded by free agency, okay? The free agency has controlled the NBA, and it's going to control the NBA. What that makes the NFL better than anything else, and maybe the Major League Baseball, but I don't really follow baseball. The NFL draft can take a team from, because they basically allow where you finish is where you can draft, right? If you're really bad, you get the first pick, and so they flip-flop it. But the NFL draft is single-handedly, in 2 years, you can take any team that's terrible, and in 2 years, if you draft correctly and draft players that are successful and you draft players that fit your mold, your system, and stuff like that, in 2 years, you could go from being absolutely awful to being a playoff contender like that. And that's what's happened to the Browns. Every year, they continue to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Last couple of years, Myles Garrett's a really good player. Baker Mayfield's a really good player. This year, they won 8 games, and they were 8-8. And if they, now they only need 1 or 2 more players, and they're going to be a playoff team.
No, absolutely. You look at across the board, there's just examples all across the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they had their big year a year ago. The Chicago Bears, they were back on top. You look at the Browns and even the Colts this year. You have 4 teams that fit the exact example that you had talked about, just drafting good players that fit into your schemes, and your life's a lot easier.
Yeah. Hey, I got to run. So let me know if you need anything else. But I appreciate everything. And if you ever need anything, you can kind of wrap it up on however you want to wrap it up. But
yeah, I definitely will. Hey, what's the likelihood of Le'Veon Bell going to be a Colt?
25%.
25%. Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, I'll see you later.
All right, thank you very much. All right, again, thanks to Aaron Elliott. We will be following up with him at some point, talking more about the draft. And I definitely want to break down the draft with him because, guys, he's a wealth of knowledge. So we'll go ahead and talk a little. We'll go ahead and play a little darts here. Leighton C, what is our dart game today?
We have a new dart game this week. It's called What Would the Job Be? It's basically we throw the dart, land on an athlete, a coach, anybody involved in the sports, and say what would their job be if they're not involved in that sport.
All right, so I like that. We'll actually go ahead and throw two. I'll have you throw two. I'll throw one,
Okay.
And we'll go back and forth on this one. So, Leighton C, your throw. And we have a 12.
12 is Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh, man, this one could get dirty.
Ben Roethlisberger, okay. Real grungy looking dude. He's a big guy too. See, the highest part of this is going to be hard. We're going to have some 7-foot guys on here.
Yeah.
So, for him...
Is it safe for me to say he'd be a bartender?
I was thinking bartender or bouncer.
Yeah.
Like one of the two things, like... He's the kind of bartender, you walk into the bar, he already knows what you're going to order. Like, that's his gift. Other than football, it's knowing what the person across him wants to drink when they get there.
Yeah, no, I think he has to be a bartender. I think you nailed it, man. Like, he's a guy that you go into a bar, he's talking to everybody, and whenever you go to this bar once, you don't go back for another month, and he immediately tells you exactly what you ordered the last time you were there.
Yeah, he knows your name. Like, for sure. And the bar he goes to, it's never packed.
No,
It's the bar
there's like five or six people there.
all the time, and it's the old guys come in. You know, you get the people come in, set the bar, you know, eat whatever bar food been made that day.
Yeah.
Or Ben talks to the cook at the bar.
Yeah, no.
Ben runs the bar.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see him as a bar owner. Like, he's the bouncer. He's the judge, jury, and executioner of the bar.
Yeah. What do his bar be called?
Big Ben's.
Love it.
That was easy.
Well, after football.
Yeah.
Big Ben's.
And he'll even sell the Roethlisberger.
Perfect. Be top seller.
Yeah, I think he's going to get into this. Once he hears this, he'll get a good idea for that.
Yeah, but since it's Big Ben, he'll have that bar as his, but he'll work at one across town that's not as popular.
Oh, yeah.
So you can stay there and drink on the job.
Oh, yeah. No, he's drinking at his own bar. That's a given. And I feel like he would be the guy that, like, you only go to his bar, like, once or twice because he pisses everybody off. Very similar to how the Steelers have been over, like, the last 15 years.
Yeah.
But it would be a success. I think Big Ben's could be a thing we could look into for the future.
Right.
All right, so now it's my throw. And we have a 6.
6 is Coach K. Mike Krzyzewski, whatever his name is.
Mike Krzyzewski. What would he do?
I go in for this one.
Oh, man.
He's definitely the guy who owns a grocery store and is way too serious about it.
Yeah, I could see that.
See him in there stocking shelves, yelling at his like teenage employees for not working hard enough.
Oh, yeah. And then, like, he'd make them wear, like, different shirts. Let's say he was running, like, a Kroger or working at Costco. And, like, if you really had been slacking off the last few days of work, he would, like, take your name tag from you and, like, take your shirt from you and say you have to work in just regular clothes because you don't deserve to wear the Costco logo.
It's a punishment. You get to wear all polos.
Yeah, you don't get to wear the
t-shirts
polos
today.
Yeah, he'd bring in a polo with, like, no name on it, or that's what you'd have to wear. You'd just be wearing just like a blue polo around Kroger, and you couldn't represent the brand in any way.
I can see him sitting in his office that has the big window, see out into the front of the store, and see when his employees are talking to another employee, no one's at the counter, so outside starts still about, these food needs stripped, all that wine need put away, you better get your ass to work. Before going back, closing the door and watching more on the computer.
Yeah, and
put out brackets.
And he would go, I feel like he would be the guy that they send in to basically, like, crack down. Like, he would just be like a temporary manager of these places. Like, if this store was failing, they'd send him there, and like
he's the Dwight Schrute of the grocery store.
Yes, the Dwight Schrute of grocery stores. Like, they would send him to just like a random location, and like, you know, the overnight shelf stockers are just in there, just chopping it up, having a good time, just basically working half-ass for the whole night shift because that's what they've done for years. And then he comes in about 3 hours early for his shift and just starts ripping into people. I love it.
I love it.
I love it. Yeah, Coach K definitely own a grocery store.
Grocery store. Books. He's the assistant manager to the manager of the owner of the grocery store.
Yes, he's the assistant to the manager of the owner of the grocery store.
Yeah,
he'd be top notch at that.
He'd be very good. He's probably very tight on ship.
Yeah, he'd run a top ship for sure. I like that one. All right, So wait and see. Third and final throw. And we have a 15.
15 is Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Oh, man.
Man, okay, so another tall guy. Giannis's face, like, he's what, 24 years old? 25? Oldest? Like, young dude still, really young. So his face is young. I can see him looking at like a drive-in movie theater. He's the guy that gave the tickets. He walking like, dang, you're fucking tall.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I know. He like hunched over. He said, that's 2 for whatever. Give it to you.
Man, I don't even
Stop
know
guy.
what he would do. He doesn't really have a personality that much.
And he's a quiet guy.
No, he's quiet, and he's really fiery. I don't even have a good one for this one. I think I'm completely stumped.
I don't know. So instead, I'll tell you a story about Giannis. You may not know.
Okay.
When he first got into the NBA, he was in Milwaukee, and he went to take a cab to the game, but he didn't have any cash. So he went to the ATM, and the ATM was broken. So what's he do? He starts jogging to the arena. So then somebody's down the road, and they see this 7-foot tall guy, and they're like, "What the heck?" So like, "Hey, you need a ride?" Giannis Antetokounmpo. How many? So he's running in the snow in shorts. Who's trying to pick him up?
Well, maybe he would just be like a marathon runner. He
That's
just
okay
get
with-
back to like his 120-pound frame that he got whenever he first came into the NBA.
That's still a sport, though.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I don't even have a good guess for this. I could definitely see the drive-in movie theater.
Yeah,
That'd be a good one.
He seems like a goofy kind of guy. Like,
Yeah.
if you see some glasses on him,
Oh, man, I don't know. I'm completely stumped.
what would Giannis do? Giannis looks like,
I don't know.
I don't know. Dippers, we failed you.
Yeah, we failed you on this one. We'll
Giannis.
throw one more. We have to throw one more.
Right.
All right, redeem ourselves. And we have a 5.
Nick Saban.
All right, Nick Saban. I think this one's easy.
What you got?
Car salesman.
Love it. I think the exact same fucking thing, I swear.
Dude, he could sell you a lemon for about 10 times the amount of what you'd buy from the store. He would actually be better than B off of Abducted in Plain Sight. He could sell the shit out of cars.
It's a shit out of a car.
Actually, he does own cars. He does own car lots.
It does. I'm not surprised. He's
Yeah.
a good car salesman. Like,
He looks like a car salesman, and he acts like a car salesman. And like, I could imagine that you go in there, and like, you are just completely confused whenever you leave the store, but you end up driving off with a car that has a sticker for like $32,000, but you ended up paying like $40,000, but he got you in that car.
who are the 3 best car salesmen in college sports? Nick Saban, Devil Sweeney, and John Calipari. Could they recruit the fuck out of some players and either they're paying them or
Yeah.
they're selling some cars?
Yeah, they're selling the shit out of them. Is it safe to say that like 90% of college coaches you could say would be a used car salesman?
Actually, it's a good chance. The successful ones, absolutely.
They all look like it.
The fact that they're going into like teenagers' homes and selling them on like a life choice, they definitely sell some guy that can buy a car he doesn't want yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely like that one the best. So just a little recap, latency. We had
Big Ben runs a bar. Coach K runs a grocery store. Giannis does nothing because all he can do is play basketball. And Nick Saban is a car salesman.
I think that I don't know if it's nothing he can do nothing
Except
other than,
basketball, but I can't picture him doing anything other than what he does right now.
no, he's like made for this.
Yeah, like this is like
Wow.
If you believe in any higher power, that higher power made Giannis for this.
Yes. We nailed 3 or 4 of those. I'll take that.
We did.
I'll take that any day of the week. So guys, we're gonna actually go through and give you our final 4 teams, who are gonna win, how they got there. Let's kind of do it. Let's kind of do it the style of the winners of the Sweet 16, and then the winners of the Elite 8, like who they played. That way, people can kind of get a look into how the brackets goes. Real quick though, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. What team could you see winning that is outside of a top 5 seed?
Tough.
No, let's go top 4. If you could look at a team and say, you know, they're outside of the top 4 seeds, what team could you see winning? I think there's actually only been like 1 since they changed the rules for how college players come in.
There have been a ton, but I think Auburn's really tough. Like,
I do like
Auburn's ranking on here and in the actual ranking is just such a disservice to how good like that team really is. Like that team beat Tennessee by 20
Yeah.
By 20. They've been beating all the good teams all year, basically. They just lose games at really awful times of bad teams, and that hurts them. I think Auburn's a very strong team. Unfortunately, they got to play UNC.
What do you think about Iowa State? Could you see those shooters getting just unbelievably hot and tearing it up through the tournament?
That's what it's going to take. I haven't been to Ohio State, but I could see them getting hot enough to where, let's say, okay, so change teams, kind of same thing, Texas Tech. I have them in the Final Four. And then in the Final Four, over the past month, they've been making a lot of threes to go along with that defense.
Yeah.
So, yes, if Ohio State shooters do get hot enough, I think that they can keep up with whoever they got to keep up with.
Yeah, I think it's a safe thing to say that Iowa State has the offense to win this tournament. Yeah. Iowa State also has the defense to lose to Ohio State.
That's not going to have to lose to Ohio State.
But if this team gets hot, which we've seen teams do in the past, I think that if you're going to take a bet on a team that's outside of that top 4 seeds to get some good return on it, I think that's your best bet.
The hardest thing is, can they do it 6 games in a row?
Yes.
With Iowa State, that's what you're asking yourself. Can they get hot 6 games in a row?
Yeah, and I mean, it would be nothing for me to blink, and 3 games into this tournament, they're shooting 43% from 3. Like, this team can get that freaking hot. And they're led by a senior guard, and we love senior guards in the tournament. So, Leighton C, we'll go ahead and we'll start in the, I guess it would be the East bracket. Go ahead. Who's winning those Sweet 16 matchups, and who is heading to the Final Four?
So my Final Four team at that bracket is Duke. Zion, I'll ask you a question here. Do you think Zion Williamson is as important to Duke as John Morant is to Murray State? Like,
he's as important.
In a sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, they're a whole different team on the court. So just for that, having the Final Four, have being Michigan State in the Elite Eight, that was really tough for me to pick. But Duke with John Williamson is too tough, and they just lost a guy named Langford.
Yes.
They lost him. He might be able to play, but if he does play, how good is he going to be able to play? In 2016, I have LSU losing to Michigan State and Duke being Virginia Tech.
So, my Final Four team, I think is pretty obvious here. If Duke was playing without Zion and they still had this number 1 seed, you can make an argument for them getting beat by VCU. Like, VCU is that good defensively to where they could shut down those 2 scorers that they have and realistically end up beating a very, very good Duke team. But my Sweet 16 matchups, I have Duke beating Virginia Tech. Obviously, it's a whole entire team whenever Zion's on the floor. Virginia Tech recently beat them, but lightning's not going to strike twice there, especially now that Zion is back. And then on the other side, I actually have Louisville beating LSU. I really like Louisville here. You look at the 2 seed who should be favored to come out of this. Is Michigan State. Louisville's already beat Michigan State whenever Langford was still healthy. And Nick Ward's now just coming back off of injury. And he's in that weird spot where they're still playing him like 10, 15 minutes a game. He only played 8 against Michigan. And once they really just basically rode without him, they seem to be a much better team at that point. In Louisville, you look at this team. They played the ACC Conference, which obviously is one of the best conferences in basketball. Then if you look at their non-conference schedule, they played Indiana whenever Indiana was absolutely on fire. They played Tennessee, Marquette, Seton Hall, beat Michigan State. And in their they also played Kentucky as well. And you look at their conference schedule, they were one of the few teams in the ACC who was able to beat UNC, and they handled them pretty easily, with the ease that they handled Duke for the first 30 minutes of their basketball game. If Louisville can play a really, really good game, night in and night out, I don't even think they have to play their perfect games. I think they just have to play good, and they are going to go to the Elite Eight, ultimately lose to Duke. Duke, I think, is just a much better team than Louisville, but I'm not counting Chris Mack out whenever he is an underdog in these situations. He's usually very, very successful. So I have Duke, Louisville in the Elite Eight, Duke advancing. So we'll go ahead and go to the West. Leighton C, what do you like in the West in Sweet 16 matchups and advancing to the Final Four?
I've always said that Texas Tech going to the Final Four, so how they got there. I have them being Michigan in the Sweet 16. Michigan, a team who they just falters too much. The defense is still extremely good, but I think Texas Tech has a really time making the threes with that good defense. I think they pulled that one out. On the other side, I've Gonzaga being Murray State. I think Gonzaga got very fortunate with their half of this bracket because they probably won't play a team better than them or even close to being as good as them the whole way there. And then I have Texas Tech being Gonzaga and Elite Eight go to Final Four.
Mine's actually pretty similar. I do have Gonzaga, but I have Florida State matching up with Gonzaga in that Sweet 16 matchup. All I have to do is just rewind to last year. Florida State was just too athletic for this team. This is a team that's been used to playing teams that are just, they're just run-of-the-mill D1 athletes. Florida State has the top notch of D1 athletes in the entirety of the bracket. You could look at them, you could seriously make an argument that this is the most athletic team in the tournament. I think Florida State's going to be too much for them. They beat them by 15 last year, and I think they're going to do the same this year. I honestly am not going to be surprised if Gonzaga even drops that game to Syracuse in the second round. Just something that they haven't seen yet, and you don't see that kind of defense in the WCC. You just don't. I know that they beat Duke earlier this year, but in times like this, I'm going to take Florida State, a team who was just in the Elite Eight a year ago, to beat Gonzaga. And then on the other side, I have Texas Tech squaring off with Nevada. Nevada, they have 6 guys that have all scored 1,000 points in their college career. Very good team. I think they're going to run into basically an unstoppable force with Texas Tech. Texas Tech's defense is the best in the country. You can say that without a doubt almost. And, they have Owens, who's a huge shot blocker down low, one of the best in this field. And Jared Culver, he can take over at any point of the game, give Texas Tech a big basket, which is a rarity for teams. Usually, if you're really, really this good at defense, you don't have that guy that you can just drop it off to and say, hey, we haven't scored a basket in 2 minutes, go get one for us. Jared Culver's the guy that's going to be able to pull that off for them. And I actually have Texas Tech beating Florida State. I see 2 very similar teams, very sound defensively, very athletic teams, but I'm giving the edge to Texas Tech just because of Jared Culver, and I think Jared Culver is going to go on a phenomenal run in this tournament. Kemba Walker-like stuff, just scoring 20 points, 25 points, whatever it's going to take, night in, night out. Texas Tech goes to the Final Four. So wait and see. We'll go ahead and go to the South. Who do you like in the South bracket?
216 is on the top. I have Virginia versus Wisconsin in just a pace of play battle of the century.
Bet the under.
Absolute
Bet
shootout.
the under.
Man, that can be awful to watch.
They played already this season. I think the under was right around 99 or 100 points.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That was the score of the game. So they're going to put the over-under at 120, which is like standard for a very, very low-scoring game. Mm-hmm. Bet it.
And then the other side, I have Tennessee beating Villanova. Quick of Tennessee, though. I really think Cincinnati can beat Tennessee. It's just Cumberland account for 25% of the points. If he's cold at all, they'll win that game.
No.
So I pick Tennessee. So Tennessee beating Villanova. Then Tennessee beating Virginia. I think that's going to be a tough grind-out game. 2 very experienced teams going at it. I think Tennessee edges Virginia out just barely.
Yeah, I think this is a tough bracket. I really do, especially whenever it's coming down to pick. You have a bunch of really good defensive teams here who stylistically can create problems with anybody. Virginia, I actually have them beating Wisconsin as well in a game that everybody should be riding the under. It's probably going to be a 45 to 50 game when it's all said and done. But I like Virginia to advance to the Elite Eight. On the other side, I have one of the only teams that can actually produce offense in this bracket at a high rate, and that's Purdue playing Tennessee. I think Tennessee is much, much better than Purdue. I think Purdue's kind of a one-trick pony. Like, if Carson Edwards goes cold at all, this team is in huge trouble. Carson Edwards is going to have to score probably 35 points just to keep pace with Tennessee. Overall, Tennessee's a better team. I have them advancing to my Elite Eight. Before the brackets were released, I thought this could be a title matchup. I thought Tennessee and Virginia would be one of the best title matchups. It's 2 of the best teams in college basketball. Tennessee probably had the number one. They were number 1 for about as long as any other team's been number 1.
They've been in the top 10 all year long.
They've been in the top 10 all year long. So you have 2 teams that have been just basically dominant all season. Tennessee versus Virginia. Both of them have guys who have been in the tournament before. They both have guys who are hungry, who haven't had that much success in the tournament. Now it's their turn to be juniors and seniors. I think Virginia's going to pull this one off. I think this is two teams that we could look up, and 80% of the points have been just from the three, because both teams are going to be so hard to score on down low. But I have Virginia outlasting Tennessee in possibly the best game of the tournament. So wait and see. We'll go ahead and go to the Midwest. Who do you like in your Sweet 16, and who are going to the Final Four?
So first half of Sweet 16, I have UNC over Auburn. I could see Auburn winning this game, but just the way UNC has looked since they started off the season not good. Since they looked past month, the maybe team basketball. On the other side, I have Kentucky being Ohio State. Then I have UNC being Kentucky. I just don't see Kentucky. They're too inconsistent. I can't see them winning 5 games in a row in a tournament like this. So I have UNC in the Final Four.
Yeah, mine's actually pretty similar to yours. I have UNC taking on Auburn. I think this team, they have gone as far as Kobe White can take them.
Yeah.
The guy's a phenomenal player. They struggled earlier. He's a freshman. Freshman point guards usually struggle at the beginning of their college basketball careers. And honestly, at any given point, you could say Kobe White's the best player on the floor, with the exception of maybe them playing a Murray State or a Duke. Kobe White, now that he's been in that leadership role, basically running this offense to death, he's the perfect guy to fit right into Roy Williams' style of basketball, where they're just running up and down the floor. I think that's going to be too much for Auburn, a team who probably hasn't seen a whole lot of that this season. The SEC, more of a slow it paced down, grinded out games. I think UNC is going to make pretty easy work of Auburn. And on the other side, this is one of the toughest matchups that I've had to pick in the bracket. I have Iowa State taking on Kentucky. I said it earlier, how Iowa State's offense is probably one of the best in the country, but the defense is a ton to be left desired with this team. I think Kentucky will beat them. I think a main reason to why they will is P.J. Washington will be too much for the guys down low for Iowa State. They really won't have an answer for him. But if he has an off night in any sense of the word, Iowa State will win this game. Like, P.J. Washington has to show up, has to play well. Mm-hmm. Him and Travis Reed, Reed Travis will be the two biggest difference makers. Those are the two guys that will beat Iowa State. And ultimately, I think P.J. Washington is good enough to basically put the team on his back and advance this team into the Elite Eight. Here we have a very good matchup. Obviously, Blue Bloods, UNC versus Kentucky. I think UNC is going to be too much for them, though. I mean, they're an experienced team led by a phenomenal point guard in Kobe White. I think Kobe White, very similar to Jared Culver, is going to have a phenomenal tournament. And they have the help of, Luke May, kind of that experienced, smart player who might be able to get, P.J. Washington, maybe Reed Travis into that foul trouble, and ultimately win this game against Kentucky. I have UNC advancing to the Final Four. So wait and see. We'll go ahead and talk about our Final Four predictions. Who's going to win your tournament and why?
First half Final Four, I have Duke versus Texas Tech. I have Duke win this game. I think Texas Tech could very well win this game.
Absolutely.
It's just
they were beating Duke at halftime the first time they played.
It's just Duke without Williamson is just like another force. Like, I'm not gonna say the NBA team, but with him out there on the court, 3 for 13, he never misses a shot.
Yes.
They're going to follow the other side, Tennessee, UNC. I think UNC is the best team in the country. Have them edging out Tennessee. In the championship game, I have UNC beating Duke.
That will be the first time they ever play in a tournament.
I know, that'd be nuts. Duke did just beat UNC by what, 2? 1-2?
Last second, I think it might have been 1.
Yeah, it was 1 point. That was Roy Williams' first time seeing Zion Williamson.
Yes.
Lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
He is going to beat Duke championship game. UNC will win it all. Sorry, Brandon.
I actually like that. I think UNC is as talented as anybody. So we actually have a very similar Final Four. I have Duke taking on Texas Tech. I think this is a game Texas Tech can win. I talked about it earlier with Owens down low for Texas Tech. He's extremely long, and he can jump out of the gym and block basically anything. I think he's going to create a ton of problems for Zion this time around, but I think that they're Duke's ancillary pieces, which is weird to call them ancillary pieces because they're top 10 recruits from last year. I think those guys are a little more than what Jared Culver is going to bring to the table and be able to score for Texas Tech. I think it's going to be a very, very close game, but I would not be surprised at all if Texas Tech is able to pull out this win. But I have a Duke heading to the title game. On the other side of the bracket, I have Virginia and UNC. This is going to be a fun one, another one. But I love the experience that Virginia brings to this game. I mean, they're led by basically all guards. And Huff, the big guy, he's actually started to develop a three-point shot. He's gotten better at it as the season's gone on. And this team, as much as they slow it down, they can still score baskets in a hurry. You look at the game against Syracuse where it was very, very close going into halftime, and Virginia basically just busted it open with nothing but three-point shots. Virginia, they're going to get back on defense, something that Duke does not do, and they are going to make UNC actually work for shots instead of just getting a ton of transition points. So, and you saw it at the end of the last game Virginia played UNC. Once Virginia really started to make them have to work for their shots, they weren't as successful as whenever they get in the open floor. Therefore, I like Virginia to win that game. Head to the title game, Duke versus Virginia. Hard to beat a team 3 times. Mm-hmm. A good team is hard to beat 3 times. I think Tony Bennett will be cutting down the nets for the first time, and it is going to be very, very... It's going to be an amazing story. They're going to make 30 for 30s out of this kind of shit. You lose to a freaking 16 seed one year, you win the tournament the next year. I have Virginia winning the tournament based off of... This is the one thing I'm going to ride on to say why Duke will not win the tournament. There's 3 teams since they developed the one-and-done rule. There's 3 things that every team has had since they started the one-and-done rule. Every team that has won a title has had this in common. They've had a guard that is one of the top 2 scorers on their team. They've had a guard that scores 10 or more points on their team. Duke does not have that. Neither of those 2. And they have a guy who's in the top 2 scoring on their team that is not a freshman. You're probably thinking the Kentucky team that won in 2012. Kentucky, they had Doron Lamb, who was the second leading scorer on that team behind Anthony Davis, who was a sophomore. And then you're thinking, yes, you can win this thing, but nothing but bigs. You can't. Even those teams that Florida brought with Al Horford and Joakim Noah had Taurean Green as their 1 or 2 leading scorers in both the years that they won the title. So I think I'm just going to ride with history here. Yes, it's kind of laughable that I'm going to say I'm going to ride with history and put Virginia to win this thing. But this is a different Virginia team that we've seen in the past. Virginia has never had a team that was ranked as high as they are in the Ken Pom ranking as far as offense goes. They're usually right around the top 30. They're, I think 27 was the highest that they've had with Tony Bennett. Now this is a team that's one of the top 5 most efficient teams scoring the basketball. So I love Virginia to win this tournament.
I can say last year Drake locked them in and lost to the 16 seed. So the partners are going to whip.
Oh yeah, don't listen to anything I said because like the last 3 years, I think my tournament team, my winner did not make it out of the first 2 rounds. So yeah. That's a good start.
Tough history.
Very bad history. All right, guys. So now it is time for our producer to be put in the spotlight as each week he does his Pips Entertainment Review.
So this week I'm reading a movie you might not have heard of. If you haven't, you definitely should. It's called Fine With My Family. If you're a wrestling fan, you've definitely heard about this because WWE made the movie. It follows a family who just does like the small venue wrestling thing. Kind of you have a local mall.
Like Mr. Shackelford?
Yes. Just the same as Shackelford from a nugget sandwich. So you're kind of like a local mall. You have like maybe like someone's pole ball and they do wrestling stuff in. Kind of like that. And then they keep sending in videos, WWE. And they invite to a tryout for the NXT, which I guess is the D League or G League of the WWE. And then one woman makes it, and then she becomes really famous. So the movie, I thought was really good. The only person really notable in it is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
Hell yes.
But he's in it for a whole 2 scenes.
What?
He is top billing. It's a good people to go see a movie, 100%. He's top billing in the movie. He's in, I think, he's in 2 scenes, maybe 3, but I think it's 2. And then you have
And he was the highest paid in this thing.
Oh, yeah.
So they basically were just like, how are we going to make this wrestling movie relevant? They're like, we'll spend all of our money on The Rock.
Yep.
And everybody in the room's just like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Then you have Lena Headey, who is the girl from Game of Thrones, as the mom. And then you have Vince Vaughn, who is like the NXT coach. The movie was really good. Well, I would say really good. The movie was good. My expectations were definitely exceeded. I thought it was legitimately funny. Like, for a good part of the movie, I was just laughing hysterically in the movie theater to the people in it. So, basically, if you like the WWE, go like this movie. If you like sports movies, what do you like them for? You like them can make you feel kind of inspired at the end. You like them just because you like that one sport. That's going to be the deal there. If you hate wrestling, you find it really, really stupid. If you just acknowledge what wrestling is, you're going to get a kick out of it and enjoy it enough to like it. That's where I sat, so I'm going to get 1.9 dips.
1.9. Hey, that's a respectable score for
Very
this thing.
solid score. Very solid score.
So the only notable guy that anybody would know would be The Rock.
Vince Vaughn.
Oh, Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, he's the coach for the NXT guys.
That's awesome.
He's funny.
I'm locked in. I'm going to have to watch that.
It's a very odd Vince Vaughn. Like, no one Vince Vaughn is like kind of like a firecracker on the scene. Like,
No, Vince Vaughn is... The only guy I know Vince Vaughn as would be, like, old school. Like, he's that same guy.
yeah. He's that guy in this movie, but there are moments in time where he has to be more serious. Like, he has to tell one of the kids that they're not making WWE, and that was like a longer monologue from him, so you could tell it's supposed to be a more important part of his performance. And it was just Vince Vaughn, and having seen Rating Crashers and Old School and the breakup, stuff like that, I just wasn't out. It didn't get me.
Right. All right. So, what's it called? Fight with Family?
Fighting with my family.
Fighting with my family.
1.9 dips. If you like the WWE, you probably think it's better than that because you have more respect for it.
Right.
But for me, just me appreciating what WWE is, and you're going to just to enjoy it for 9 dips. But honestly, though, great advertising.
Yeah.
Great advertising by
Yeah.
WWE making me about
That's
the
pretty
product.
smart. Pretty smart. All right, Latency. So what bold predictions do you have for this week? You may have more than one because this is going to be a hell of a week of sports.
All right, we've now had Machado, Arenado, and Trout all sign their contracts. Bismarcks have been set. Mookie Betts will sign an extension, 10 to 12 years, $350 to $400 million by this time next week.
All right, I like that, actually. That would definitely be good for your Red Sox. My bold prediction is that in the first round of the NCAA tournament, we are going to have an instant classic on our hands. It will be the Murray State Racers taking on the Marquette Golden Eagles. And I see the starting point guards for these teams, John Morant, Marcus Howard, they will combine for more than 70 points between the two of them. And we are having instant classic on our hands. This thing could go into overtime. It'll be back and forth, one-on-one basketball, and I cannot be more excited for that game. So, Latency, anything else before we wrap this show up?
No, you said it all.
All right, and on that note, for Drake, for Leighton, as always, Dippers, stay saucy.